Now to a story that many of you continue to ask us about. 6 weeks ago in northern Kentucky, husband and wife were killed in their home, but the police are being extremely tight-lipped on this one.
And tonight we have found out some neighbors are so concerned they've moved out. Here's Laura Borchers with the story.
I didn't hear anything, see anything, but my dog was acting very suspicious.
Good boy. Nicole Fire unlocked her door May 29th and took her dog out.
What is it? He always goes down to the back and does his business. And then he started coming back up and just growling and wanting to go back down there. And then he ran in the house and ran to the back deck and back outside. And like there was something just definitely not right out there.
Now she fears that barking should have alerted her to a suspicious person behind her home. The next day she learned her neighbors, Bill and Peggy Stephenson, were found dead on the floor of their condo.
They were such wonderful people. You just can't, as I said, you can't imagine anybody wanting to harm them in any way.
The couple was best known for giving with their church and volunteering on their own.
There's a couple couples that have moved out.
The Stevenson's condo building once held several families. Now neighbors say just one.
Oh, I would love for their family members to know that everybody in the community is praying for them, hoping that there's a resolution soon, and all the people that they helped will find some peace in how they've been helped.
Hi guys, welcome to my channel. So I'm sure a lot of you guys have already heard about this new link between the Delphi murders and Bill and Peggy Stephenson, their murder that happened in 2011. Okay, so I'm going to give you a little summary of some of the details of that murder. So in the early morning hours of Sunday, May 29th, 2011, Bill and Peggy Stephenson, both 74 years old, were bludgeoned and stabbed to death in their Florence, Kentucky condo. There was no sign of forced entry, and neighbors living in close proximity did not report seeing or hearing anything unusual that night, which is kind of not true because we just saw that news clip where that lady did say, she didn't see or hear anything, but her dog was acting kind of weird, like he saw something. Anyway, so the murders were discovered later that day, shortly before 1 p.m. on May 29th, by a family member who had gone back to check on the couple. By that time, they had not only missed Memorial Day church service, but Bill had not shown up to the truck stop ministry he ran. The victims were found in 2 separate rooms of the condo, and the one thing that was obvious to investigators was that the killer had spent extensive time at the scene. We know the scene had been cleaned, but more strangely, it had also been heavily staged. The bodies had been posed in separate rooms, although exactly what is meant by this is one of the many details the investigators are keeping close to their vests. The killer had left a message in the home, presumably written. Not only had the bodies been subject to post-mortem manipulation, but items in the home had been staged as well. Some of these items had positioned around the bodies, while others had been moved to what investigators believe were different places within the condo than their original locations. Items had been moved, altered, and rearranged in every room of the home. Adding to the utterly bizarre nature of the scene, the couple's photographs had been tampered with, being arranged in such a way as to suggest the killer liked certain people and disliked others. Investigators with the Boone County Sheriff's Department would describe it as the scene they, the killer, wanted found, and not the crime scene. Detective Coy Cox was one of the original lead investigators on the case, and since being assigned to the cold case unit of the Criminal Investigation Division, he has been reviewing it again. He had this to say about the scene inside the condo. There were things that were maybe on end tables or up on shelves that were changed, altered, moved, turned over, or marked on. There were items that seemed to have no significant meaning left in different rooms. Most of the items that were left at the scene appeared to be things that were probably in the residence. He stated that it was the most unique crime scene that he had ever seen, and that it is his belief that some of the staging was done to suggest different motives. The attack on the couple was a brutal instance of overkill, which could be read as a more personal motive. Some signs pointed to robbery. However, there were valuable items that would have been easy targets for theft that were left behind. Some elements even suggested a ritualistic tone to the crime, to the point that the law enforcement obtained a list of self-described Wiccans in the area. However, one expert stated that there are no elements of a genuine ritual present, suggesting that this may have been coincidental or another attempt at misdirection. In addition to concealing the motive, some other repositioning is speculated to have been used to obscure the point of entry. There was actually DNA found at multiple locations around the scene, all coming from the same individual. However, its use has been limited thus far, and it's not even specified that it had to belong to the killer. It has not been matched to any persons of interest, and it has not matched any DNA samples in the CODIS bank. The DNA is not suitable for genealogy and phenotyping at this time. We hope in the future that changes. Phenotyping is generating a physical description of a person based on genetic material, and genealogy is attempting to identify the donor of a DNA sample based on family and population genetics. It's not clear why the sample is not suitable for these types of analyses, but may simply mean that it was a small sample. So it's still unsolved, and there's this link. They're very vague about it, and they're not telling us very much information. That's how this case has been going. As far as the Delphi case, they've been very hush-hush about it the whole time, which I understand. I know they have to keep the integrity of the case and stuff, but so here's a couple things that I've heard here about this, and then I'll play some news clips and read the article and stuff. Okay, so supposedly there's somebody that knew information about the Stevenson murder that law enforcement did not release. So they're looking into him. They're looking into these new leads, I guess. So they have DNA in the Stevenson murder, but they can't find whose DNA it belongs to, okay? So they're waiting for the results. I guess there's a trucker that they're waiting to compare a DNA to. And supposedly there's some artifact that maybe is the same in the Delphi murder and in the Stevenson murder. It's just the way they word it, it's like, it's kind of frustrating because they won't tell you what it is, right? What the connection is. But it seems like it's like some kind of something that was left at both scenes. So there's this hacker, his name is Alex Voorhees. So he did this podcast, which I'm going to play you some clips from it, back in July. And he talks about this connection. And he talks about other cases too. He brings up his theory on, there's like 4 or 5 other cases that he names that he thinks could all be connected to the Delphi case. But he brings up this Bill and Peggy Stephenson. So he's actually the one who helped law enforcement out with hacking into Anthony Schott's, Keegan Klein's profile. And I guess he got into some of his accounts and helped him get into certain accounts and certain areas of the accounts that law enforcement wasn't able to get into. And I guess he sent it to him and helped him out in that way. So supposedly he's the one that gave law enforcement this tip about Bill and Peggy Stevenson's murder and the similarities that it has with the Delphi murders. So supposedly this tip somehow jogged one of the investigators' memory to somehow remember this item that was left at the scene that's similar to something that was left at the scene at Delphi. Declining to specify who the tipster accused of carrying out both double murders, Cox said, the information pointed investigators toward a specific person who had a specific item that they were interested in. Cox refused to specify what the item was and how it apparently links both crimes. But the individual named in the tip is cooperating with the investigation and is not currently considered a suspect at this time, he said. So supposedly the fact that the crime scene was staged, the body posing, the fact that they think it wasn't some random event, that it was something personal, and then whatever else that they know that they're not saying that links the Delphi to this Stevenson case. Like some kind of similarities that they're picking up on, and then supposedly there's something that was left at the scene, okay? So let me play you a couple clips, and we'll talk a little bit more about some of the other cases, too, that Alex Voorhees sees a connection with.
Detective Coy Cox and his partner make up Boone County's cold case unit, yet they say the murder of Bill and Peggy Stephenson is far from cold. In fact, they've traveled to at least 14 other states to follow up on leads, including several trips to Delphi, Indiana. And they're pursuing potential breaks in the case using a DNA profile. A man heavily involved in ministry, he shared his faith with truck drivers every Sunday at a truck stop in Florence.
They had a trailer out that they would open up during the week, and if truckers wanted to stop in and pray, they would pray with them.
That connection to the community became a possible lead for detectives Cox and Adams. Today, they handle the sheriff's cold case unit, but they're still investigating the Stevenson case. Over the years, they've interviewed a lot of truck drivers.
Early on in the investigation, we had information that someone had been at the truck stop looking for Bill pretty aggressively, banging on the door of the chapel, asking if anyone had seen Bill.
There are truckers they've ruled out, others still on their radar. They've also looked into Charles Stevie Stevenson, the nephew of Bill and Peggy. Detective Cox says they've even spoken to him recently. Stevie is locked up, spending life in prison for beating an Indiana woman to death with a skillet.
We feel pretty comfortable that that's in a good place. There is no final statement on there. It isn't that he's been cleared, but we have certainly vetted him in every way possible.
One of the largest developments in the case could still bring them the break they need to close it. Detective Cox says they have an unknown DNA profile.
We don't know who that DNA belongs to, and it was found at our crime scene.
It is complex, so genealogy isn't an option, at least right now. There is testing they can do to try to find a match, and that's something they're actively pursuing.
We're just still hopeful that they'll come up with the right evidence that they need, and a confession would be great. But we're still hopeful that they'll solve it.
More than a decade later, tips continue to come in. Detectives even traveled across state lines in recent weeks to see if what happened to the Stevensons has any connection to the murder of 2 young girls in Delphi.
We had received some information from an individual regarding the Delphi murders in Indiana, and they had said for all of these reasons, we believe it may be the same person that was involved in the Stevenson case.
So Bill and Peggy Stephenson, you found their murder, double homicide in Kentucky.
Yeah. And so I was looking for info on that. And right off the bat, I saw some similarities because the cops were not saying the cause of death, and they said things were staged. So I'm seeing staging, posing, body posing, and I'm like, that's kind of weird.
What is that?
So staging is like where you stage a crime scene after the fact. So like somebody's dead, and let's say you put a Christmas tree over their head or something. That's like staging, It's like you're trying to like
you're tagging.
Draw attention off the fact. And then body posing, goes without saying, like you pose them after the fact, I was looking at this old Blogspot website, and in the comments, somebody had said that they knew the grandson and that the Stevensons had been nearly decapitated as well, and it didn't say that in any other news article. So I'm like, all right, nearly decapitated, posing, staging,
How were they staged?
I don't know. The cops haven't said that. They just said that the whole things were moved around in their house. Furniture was just all out of whack, and they didn't give away all the details, but they said it was staged.
And they said the same thing about the Delphi murders as well. There was something staged where he left the bodies.
Yeah, okay. Robert Ives, he's some sort of law enforcement, but he was saying that it was staged signatures. So I didn't know about the posing other than the rumored text at the time. So going off that comments that hit, I'm like, dang, we got one, dude. Like, far less noise than the Delphi murders. So I'm like, less noise. I could probably see a lot clearer over here where it's away from all the craziness over there on the Delphi murders. I clicked a site on, what was it? It was Reddit, a news article about them, right? Bill and Peggy.
Yeah,
and somebody was making like a out of whack comment, like all cryptic. And the thing with them is there wasn't any other weirdo comments on their death. Like Delphi.
What was the comment?
He said that they were swingers, and somebody asked him what he was talking about, and if he was implying there was more than one murderer, and he's like, I already said too much, like all cryptic. Like he was just like going all wacko. So, I showed my brother, and he's like, a bunch of weirdos on the internet. I want to look into it. Like it's, it's whatever. But I was thinking like Delphi gets a lot of those comments like daily because it's so popular. I'm like Stevenson's, it happened so long ago.
It was 2011.
Yeah, barely anybody's talking about them, on social media, like the Delphi murders. So I'm like, this is, So Delphi murders, let's say you got a case with thousands of weirdo comments a day, and then you got a case with no weirdo comments a day, but then you hit, one weirdo comment out of the blue. So it's like, which one you take more serious? Which one you're going to look at? Which one can you do more damage on? So I was looking at this weirdo comment. What else stuck out to me was that he was local. So he was not too far from where they were, and this account was rigged to be anonymous. Like No real name on it. The username didn't check out anywhere else. He would talk about what city he was in, what his hobbies were, that his job was in programming. He didn't say where. And he said
on Reddit, he's putting comments like this. Okay.
Yeah, he said he was using a Pine phone for privacy, like all this wacko stuff. I showed this to detectives, and they're like, "Yeah, we wanna know who's behind this. You know, who's writing this. Like it is." Interesting, you know. So I told them who I thought it was based on the Reddit comments, and it was a completely wrong, like, different guy, you know. It was like he matched all the same things, and I didn't post it publicly, like I'm not doxing anybody or anything. But I told detectives who I thought it may be, so, you know, I gave them that info because he had the same occupation, lived in the same city, you know, that the Redditor said they lived in. He had same hobby, which was, the big one was Go or Baduk. It's like a Chinese chess type game, some nerdy game. I gave him that info, and this guy, the Reddit account, knew that people were looking for him, right? So he deletes his account, right? It's gone like a week after I reported to police. Like everything deleted, dude. So I didn't hear back from police for about a month, and I'm like, you know what? Like, I had a hunch that something wasn't quite right. Like, it wasn't, I didn't have enough to be like, yeah, this guy's the one who did that, you know? So
A nightmare that you never wake up from and that you wouldn't wish on your worst enemy.
Well, at this stage of the investigation, detectives tell me they are not prepared to rule anything or anyone out. They've tried everything, including talking to mediums and psychics and announcing a $50,000 reward for information. And they're working on some of their latest leads right now. The disturbing deaths of Bill and Peggy Stephenson left so many in the Boone County community shattered.
It was just horrible, you know, just to find out that they're both gone and that it wasn't an accident, wasn't carbon monoxide. It was at the hands of somebody else. It was almost too much to bear.
The couple was murdered inside their own home in May 2011 after living lives filled with love and ministry.
We are careful in this case because of the complexity of some of the evidence, not to say that anyone has been ruled out, but we certainly take it all the way down the path as far as we can to where it's like, okay, we don't see the need to go on down this path because it's not looking like that is our individual.
In November 2022, a tip led them to a neighboring state.
We had received some information from an individual regarding the Delphi murders in Indiana, and they had said for all of these reasons, we believe it may be the same person that was involved in the Stevenson case.
Right away, detectives started looking into a possible connection between Bill and Peggy's 2011 murder and the murders of Abby Williams and Libby German in Delphi, Indiana in 2017, a case that's garnered national attention.
There's things that will make you really interested in a case, simply more than just somebody saying, hey, we think this person might have been involved. But we had a little piece of information that really made that case specifically interesting to us.
The information pointed Boone County investigators toward a specific person who had a specific item they were interested in.
I'm not going to tell you about that, what that item was. We've recently been in the northern part of Indiana investigating this guy, following him around, looking for things, collecting all of the information and the evidence that we would need to at least vet him as best we could with our case. He was cooperative. We were able to go down that path with him, and he articulated good reason to why that may have existed.
They sent what they found to Indiana State Police, since they are handling the murder investigation of Abby and Libby. To be clear, Detective Cox says their investigation into a potential link between the two cases did not include Richard Allen.
We received information from Indiana as it related to some persons, and we forwarded that to them. We did not send them the information that led them to Richard Allen. We sent them information that may have had some parallel consistencies with where they are with that case right now.
When Boone County detectives were in Delphi, Allen was already in jail, where he has been since October of 2022, accused of Abby and Libby's murders.
I know that sounds a little cloak and dagger, but I'm just sorry about that. We're not going any further with that.
That's not the only lead they're following.
We have two gentlemen that are in the trucking profession that we have collected DNA from, and we are awaiting response back from the Kentucky State Police Lab.
They're waiting on results from the lab to see if the truck driver's DNA matches the unknown profile found at the Stevenson crime scene. It has Detective Cox feeling hopeful. As someone who has been on the case since day one, it's personal.
That's hard. That's on my watch. That's my case. I want to solve it. I don't want to say it's more special, but it's a very special case and really like to get it solved. As we would all of them, obviously, but yeah, this one has a little extra, tug.
Brought up a lot of leads in this two-part story. DNA testing, the nephew, Stevie Stevenson, truckers, and of course, that possible connection to Delphi. So where does it all stand right now? Well, Detective Cox stressed they have not ruled anyone out in the Stevenson case. So even though some leads don't look as likely, they haven't eliminated any of them completely. Now, he won't say if they have any specific suspects or people of interest, but told me he does believe whoever did it has committed other crimes. He did confirm they know the exact time the couple died because of a medical device inside one of the victims, something that could help them pinpoint the killer. Anyone with information on this case is urged to call it in right away. Now, you can watch all of our Crime Vault stories online right now on fox19.com or on our free news app. We also have a podcast called Cincinnati's Crime Vault Beyond the Broadcast. An episode on this case, the Stevenson case, will drop next month with more details from detectives.
So here is the original press release. I'm going to read it to you here real quick. May 29th, 2011. On Sunday, May 29th, 2011, at approximately 1 p.m., Boone County Sheriff's deputies were called to the 7400 block of Ridge Edge Court near Florence, Kentucky, to investigate the discovery by a family member of the deaths of a married couple in their home. The couple, names withheld, were last heard from on Friday, the 27th, and when they failed to attend church services this morning, a member of the family went to their home to check on their well-being. Sheriff's investigators are not speculating how the couple died, but are investigating the scene completely to ensure nothing is overlooked. No other information concerning the case is being released at this point so as not to jeopardize the investigation. Update Monday, May 30th, 2011 at 10:30 a.m. The victims are identified as William and Peggy Stephenson, both 74 years old, of the 7400 block of Ridge Edge Court near Florence, Kentucky. We are investigating this as a double homicide at this point. Update Wednesday, June 22nd, 2011 at 9 a.m. As the complex investigation develops, detectives have obtained a photo of a man they are hoping to identify from the TA, Travel Center of America, truck stop located in the 7700 block of Burlington Pike in Florence, Kentucky. The man was seen speaking with Bill Stevenson on Friday, May 27, 2011, there at the truck stop. At this point, he is considered a person of interest who might provide us insight since he could be one of the last people to speak to Bill. Anyone who could provide information is asked to call the Boone County Sheriff's Department tip line at 859-334-3500 or Crime Stoppers at 513-352-3040. Update Friday, June 24th, 2011 at 10 a.m. We have identified the man in the photo from the truck stop. See previous update. He contacted the Meriwether County, Georgia Sheriff's Office yesterday morning after he learned we were looking for him. He was very cooperative and submitted to an interview with those Georgia authorities. While I am not prepared to release his identity, he is a truck driver who was contacted by an acquaintance who saw his picture on television here locally. That press release seemed to spur renewed interest in the case among the public, who have provided us additional leads not connected with photo. We encourage anyone who thinks they might have information concerning the case to contact the sheriff's tip line. Update on Friday, July 22nd, 2011 at 1 p.m. Investigators have identified Sherman D., also goes by Dwayne, Angel, 48, a transient, as someone who had been with Bill Stevenson at the truck stop. Angel holds a Arizona driver's license, but is believed to be in the area due to a July 20th arrest and release in Kenton County, Kentucky, and who was in this area Memorial Day weekend. Angel is considered a witness who needs to be interviewed to determine if he can provide information concerning the Stevenson homicides. Anyone with information as to Angel's whereabouts is asked to call either the Boone County Sheriff's tip line at 859-334-3500 or Crime Stoppers. Update on Friday, July 22nd, 2011 at 3 p.m. Sherman Angel has been located. He called into the office when he heard we were looking for him. Detectives are speaking to him as of this writing. Update on Monday, September 12th, 2011 at 3 p.m. Investigators are asking for the person who called in a tip to the Shelbyville, Kentucky Police Department late last week to call them directly. Shelbyville police passed on what information was given to them, but our detectives would like to speak to the person to obtain more specific information. The caller provided a name, but there happened to be 4 people with the same name residing in Kentucky. We are not concerned with the caller's identity, just in the information he or she could provide. Okay, so I'm going to read these articles here, at least parts of them. So this is the Fox one. It says investigators looking into possible link between Stevenson murders and Delphi case. One of the Boone County's most horrific killings remains unsolved nearly 12 years later, but the detectives working the Stevenson case are leaving no stone unturned. In recent months, their investigation has even led them to Indiana to look into a possible connection to the highly publicized Delphi double murders. In recent months, their investigation has even led them to Indiana to look into a possible connection to the highly publicized Delphi double murders. Detective Coy Cox and his partner, Tim Adams, make up the Boone County Sheriff's Office Cold Case Unit. However, they say the murders of Bill and Peggy Stephenson are far from cold. It was a very complex, brutal, disturbing crime scene. We think it was, a very quick surprise attack, Cox said. There was some blunt force trauma. When Cox and Adams were sent to the scene that day, they discovered the house had been altered and the bodies had been staged. Whoever killed the couple had not taken off right away. There were things that were done to the bodies that was horrific. They changed several things in the scene, which is really, really unusual for any murder scene anywhere in the country or in the world, Cox said. There was quite a bit of time that the perpetrators, the killers, stayed in the residence or felt comfortable coming back to the scene. In general, detectives believe that kind of behavior points to a suspect who knows the victims, and Bill and Peggy Stephenson were loved by many people. They were amazing people, good Christian people, Cox said. They wanted to share their faith and love with the community. Bill and Peggy's daughter, Beth Stevenson Victor, called it a scary situation. It's pretty bad that somebody could that they could stage something and stay with the bodies like that for, multiple hours. It's pretty sick, she said. You were constantly looking over your shoulder, and just up until about 3 years ago, my front blinds never opened. Just within the last 3 years, I've been able to sit with the blinds open. Beth described her parents as devoted churchgoers, a couple who loved their big family. Beth called her mother, Peggy, the quiet one, and said she was an experienced and talented musician. She played for many weddings, funerals, played for a couple of the grandkids' weddings, Beth said. She loved to play the organ. She played the piano too. Bill was the opposite in that he was often called the life of the party. As a man heavily involved in ministry, he shared his faith with truck drivers every Sunday at a truck stop in Florence. They had a trailer out that they would open up during the week, and if truckers wanted to stop in and pray, they would pray with them, Beth said. The connection to the community became a possible lead for detectives. Over the years, they have interviewed quite a few truck drivers. Early on in the investigation, we had information that someone had been at the truck stop looking for Bill pretty aggressively, banging on the door to the chapel, asking if anybody had seen Bill, Cox said. There are truckers they have ruled out, while some are still on their radar. And then this one is from March 2nd, so that one was February. Kentucky detective investigating possible connection between 2011 double murder and Delphi case. Cold case detectives at the Boone County office are investigating any possible connections between an unsolved double murder in 2011 and the 2017 killings of Abby Williams and Libby German in Delphi, Indiana. Okay, so I'm not going to reread all this stuff. It's like the same stuff, but there are a couple new things. Let's see. We know from a post-mortem injury that the killer or killers remained on the scene or came back to the scene anywhere from at least 3 hours after the murders up to 8 hours, Cox explained. They were able to change something in every room of the residence to where we actually had a scene that was not a crime scene, but it was the scene that those killers wanted us to find. Detectives found an unknown DNA profile at the scene, which has been entered into the CODIS database. How exactly Stevensons were killed has not been released publicly, but Cox described their cause of death as blunt force trauma. For years, Cox has received tips on the case. but he said he received several in fall of 2022, suggesting a connection between the Stevenson's case and the Delphi murders. The tips kept coming, and then there was a moment where we got some information that particularly we thought could have a relationship to our case, Cox said. Cox wouldn't reveal what the tip was. However, it led Cox to travel to the Fort Wayne area to interview a truck driver who had a connection to Bill Stevenson. Cox said that man was fully cooperative. We took items that can be evaluated for evidentiary purposes, and I will not say what those are, Cox said. Based on what we have right now, Cox said they don't see a connection with the Delphi murders. However, he admits both have very rare similarities in their crime scenes. A lot of those things, the staging, multiple victims, spending time post-mortem, Cox explained, a lot of those things make these kind of cases like the 1% kind of cases that you see. In May 2022, Fox obtained court records that described the Delphi crime scene. The murderer likely took a souvenir from the crime scene, according to the document, and it appeared the girls' bodies were moved and staged. Cox made it clear that he does not believe Richard Allen, the man accused in the Delphi murders, had anything to do with the Stevenson's murders. However, during one of Allen's first court hearings, Carroll County prosecutor Nicholas McClelland said in court that there was a good reason to believe Allen is not the only one involved. Could one of those other people have a connection to the Stevenson case? That's something Cox and his partner continue to investigate. Cox said he shared all of the information he's gathered with Indiana State Police. ISP said it couldn't comment on this story because of the gag order imposed in the Richard Allen case. The detective said since this information has come to light, his office has received numerous tips, and he hopes people continue to provide any information they can. I'm going to read this about Delphi. Evidence released to the public included a photo of a heavy-set suspect in a blue jacket and brief audio of a man's voice saying, "Down the hill." The search warrant revealed that the recording from Libby German's phone lasted 43 seconds, a fraction of which has been made public. Investigators have long believed the individual in the video participated in the murders. The girls' bodies were discovered on property owned by Ron Logan, about 1,400 feet from Logan's residence. A large amount of blood was lost by the victims at the crime scene, according to the search warrant. Because of the amount of blood, investigators believe the perpetrator would have gotten blood on their hands or clothing. The murderer likely took a souvenir from the crime scene, according to the document, and it appeared the girls' bodies were moved and staged. The redacted search warrant didn't specify what was missing and noted that the rest of their clothing was recovered. There were no signs of a struggle or fight. The agent suspected the murderer physically removed something or took photos to memorialize the crime scene. Crime scene investigators also recovered unknown fibers and unidentified hairs. Okay, well, I just wanted to share that with you. Oh, you know what? Actually, something else I wanted to point out. So, Alex Voorhees, so he is finding links, possible connections between the Evansdale murders, which a lot of people have talked about that one. Iowa. It was 10 years ago that cousins 10-year-old Lyric Cook Morrissey and 8-year-old Elizabeth Collins went out for a bike ride in Evansdale, Iowa, and never returned home to their families. 5 months later, on December 5th, 2012, hunters in the Seven Bridges Wildlife Area of rural Bremer County came across two bodies which were eventually identified as Elizabeth and Lyric, found approximately 25 miles from the Black Hawk County location where they originally went missing. No one has yet been charged or arrested for these crimes. However, the investigation into the girls' deaths continues 1 decade later out of dogged determination to understand the truth of what happened to Lyric and Elizabeth. And then there is Pastor Carol Daniels in Oklahoma in 2009, murdered in a church. Her throat was slashed, body posing, crime scene staged. So this happened August afternoon in 2009. Carol Daniels made a trip she had made many times before. Carol Daniels would arrive at church at close to 10 a.m. There would be no congregants to preach to, but in case they did show up, Miss Daniels was there. At 10 a.m. to 12 p.m., these 2 hours are critically important. It is here where we struggle to find out exactly what happened within the walls of the church that has plagued local authorities and residents alike. We know Miss Daniels arrived at the church at approximately 10 a.m. A local convenience store, Stop and Fresh, had a surveillance system that was able to catch the car driven by Miss Daniels pulling up to the parking lot of the Christ Holy Sanctified Church at about that time. At approximately 11:40 a.m. on that same day, when retired Bishop Silky Wilson Jr. and his wife Julia came to the front door of the church in an attempt to visit the pastor, they would later tell investigators that they immediately knew something was not right, as the door was locked and their knocking yielded no response. At 12:01, Officer Ashley Burris arrives at the church. She makes entry into the church, goes through the side door. She notices the deceased Pastor Daniels on the floor near the pulpit. She radios for help. There's no suspect present. The details of how Mrs. Daniels was found have been fuzzy and difficult to nail down. Rumor and speculation swirled around the small town almost immediately after the murder. What is sure is that Daniels had been stabbed several times, her throat had been slit, almost to the point of decapitation, her clothes had been taken, and her hair had been set on fire. Also, what the police referred to as a dissolving agent was used in an attempt to cover up any evidence left behind. Her body placement has been the subject of speculation as well. Initial reports and rumors in town were that her body had been placed in a crucifix position behind the pulpit with her arms outspread and her feet put together. Later, investigators would make the case that it was just how her body had fallen. The nature of the murder, the profession of the woman murdered, and the lengths the perpetrators went to make the crime scene as clean of any evidence as possible make it hard to believe that her body had just fallen into that position. Somehow, someone was able to overpower Mrs. Daniels and had the time to nearly sever her head from her body, along with the time and motive to set her hair on fire and rob her clothes. Later on in the investigation, a video would emerge of an unidentified subject sprinting across the street from the church with something that looked like an object in their hands. The suspect in this video has never been identified, and almost no quality descriptive details could be gained from the video, as the suspect is only seen from a distance and the quality of the video is not good. The case still remains unsolved. And then Katie Janess, he said it was Jack Ripper inspired, throat slash, staging, post mutilation, body posing.
Sir, I'm at the entrance of Piedmont Park. I just was searching for my girlfriend's purse because I couldn't find her. She just said she's here at Piedmont Park.
Emma Clark, the wife of Piedmont Park stabbing victim Katie Janess, said it's a little hard to describe and it's pretty blurry at this point. The first thing I noticed is I saw Bowie, Clark explained. He was visible from the gate of the park. He was maybe 50 feet from the gate on the inside, and she was further on the right. I just ran in and I grabbed him because I didn't know. Maybe he was still alive. Obviously, I knew something was wrong because he was just laying there. I didn't put two and two together because I didn't notice her right away. Clark said she initially suspected Bowie, Janess's dog, was hit by a car, as they sometimes go through the road area of the park. However, when she began calling for her wife, she noticed Janess's body maybe 100 feet away. I ran up to her. I tried to feel for a pulse, but it was clear that she was gone. I turned around and I just ran out of the park, she described. It was dark and I didn't know what was going on. I was terrified and shocked. That's when I called the cops immediately. The autopsy showed Katie Janess died due to sharp force injuries of her face, neck, and torso that caused injuries to major blood vessels and internal organs. At least 15 of those wounds were to her head. The report revealed the letters F-A-T were carved into her torso. The report describes significant mutilation to her upper torso. Then he brings up the ATF robbery. And then the Chelsea Small murder. On November 12, 2013, when Taylor, Michigan police respond to a silent alarm triggered from a check advance company, they find 30-year-old teller Chelsea Small dead behind her desk. She's been shot twice at close range. Security camera video reveals that the single mother of 2 young children, who was working another employee's shift that day, buzzed a man into the business around noon. He immediately pulled out a gun and shot her in the chest, then calmly walked behind the counter and shot her in the head. After quickly rifling around the office, the man left with a small amount of cash from the register, either not finding or ignoring larger sums of money, which were kept in the back room. Although the crime has all the earmarks of an attempted robbery gone wrong, investigators noticed something unusual. The gunman is using a silencer on his weapon, a federally regulated device that is very hard to obtain and rarely used in the commission of a robbery. The use of the silencer and the calm, unhurried manner of the gunman lead police to believe that the robbery may not have been his primary motive. Was he targeting Chelsea, a well-liked woman with no known enemies or messy romantic entanglements? Or perhaps his intended victim was the other woman who was supposed to have been working that day. Or was the murder a random crime of opportunity? 8 years later, police are no closer to having the answers than they were the day Chelsea was killed. Police believe the gunman to be a white male between the ages of 35 and 50, approximately 5 feet 10 inches tall, with longish dark hair, and who walks with an irregular gait. So I see one of the connections is Bridge Guy's gait. It's been talked about a lot. So this guy has a unique gait too. Kind of fits the description. What do you guys think? Honey and Barry Sherman is from 2017 in Toronto. Gait, body posing, staging.
Yeah, 5 years since the couple was found dead in their home here in Toronto. They were found by the indoor pool in their home. The couple in their 70s when they were killed. Heather, Barry Sherman, 75 years old, Honey Sherman, 70. Barry Sherman, founder of the giant drug company Apotex. Police saying at the time that there were no signs of forced entry. And 5 years on, this case, their murders remain unsolved. Police have said in the past that they've interviewed more than 200 people. They've received hundreds of tips. The family's also hired a private investigator, and yet no arrests have been made in this case. Toronto police say it's an active and ongoing investigation. They're committed to solving it, they say, Heather, and bringing closure to the friends and family of Barry and Honey Sherman. And closure is one of the words that's used in this new statement that CBC's received from one of the Sherman's 4 children, Jonathan Sherman. He writes in this statement about the pain and sorrow he feels over his parents' deaths, and he's saying that he can't get closure, the family can't get closure until those responsible for these murders is brought to justice. Here's a bit more of what he writes in this statement. He writes, "My parents deserve to enjoy the fruits of their labor and spend their twilight years as any grandparent should with their family. I continue to miss my parents more than I can describe, and I am forever haunted by what happened to them." He also talks in this statement about his parents' generosity. Heather, they were known as huge philanthropists in their communities, and he's saying in this statement what a huge void their deaths have left. And so he is saying he is now putting up $25 million as part of the reward for information leading to the arrest and conviction of a person responsible for these murders. There was already a $10 million reward. He's now upping it by another 25 to bring it to $35 million. And he made an emotional plea in this statement, Heather, for anyone with information to contact Toronto police.
So there's a security video of a person identified as a suspect in the murders of Barry and Honey Sherman, who were found dead on December 15th, 2017. This person's purpose in the neighborhood is unexplained. The timing of the appearance is in line with when the investigators believe the murders took place. Investigators asked the public to pay particular attention to the person's gait, how they are walking. Through analysis, it is believed the suspect is between 5'6" to 5'9". There may be a legitimate reason this person is in the neighborhood, and police urge the person to come forward. Anyone with information should call homicide at 416-808-7400 or give a tip anonymously at Crime Stoppers 416-222-8477. So it's just all kind of like connections that Alex talked about. Oh, and there's one more, Missy Beavers. That's another one that he thinks could be connected because of the guy has like a unique gait. So in the early morning hours of April 18th, 2016, Missy Beavers left her home and arrived at Midlothian's Creekside Church of Christ just after 4 a.m. to lead an early morning fitness class, which was scheduled to begin at 5 a.m. It was raining, but she had updated Facebook with a post stating, "If it's raining, we're still training." So class was on. Unbeknownst to Missy, an unknown person wearing unofficial tactical police riot gear had already forced their way into the church prior to her arrival. Security cameras inside the church first see this person at 3:50 a.m. This unknown individual was seen by security footage roaming the dark halls of the church, and they appear to be searching for something or someone while breaking windows and going through offices in the building. One of her students arrived shortly after 5 a.m. and discovered Missy's body. Police were called immediately, and the student reported that Missy was unresponsive and had puncture wounds to her chest and head. Police and EMS arrived at the scene and pronounced Missy dead. Police reported that Missy Beavers' cause of death was the multiple puncture wounds to her chest and head. Although Missy's official autopsy report was not released by investigators, police did explain to the public that her injuries were consistent with a hammer or an object that looks like a mallet that the suspect held as they walked through the church. The suspect's gender is not discernible. They are between 5'2" and 5'8" and walked with a limp as their feet pointed outward as they walked. So I think the similarities he sees in this case with the Delphi case is the walk, the gait, the limp that BG is so well known for. Okay, so I'm going to let the rest of this surveillance play through so we can watch it. And then there's another piece of surveillance that they got from this case, which I will play after this. A few weeks later, police found security footage from a nearby sporting goods store and discovered a Nissan Altima driving around a nearby car park a few hours before the murder. This video was also released to the public, but the car owner never came forward and no one knew who the car belonged to. Okay, so then Alex goes on to talk about there's this guy that posts something that says that his psychic friend is telling him information about who the killer is, and he said the name is Joseph or Charles, and Alex goes on to say Joseph and Charles were the two main suspects of Jack the Ripper. Yeah, let me know what you guys think. It doesn't look like there probably is it. I don't know. I'm thinking it is probably not a connection between Delphi and Bill and Peggy Stephenson. I think they're going to find out, but I would like to know what object they're talking about. I wonder if they're ever going to tell us. A lot of the stuff with Delphi, it's like they still haven't told us stuff. It's been how many years? So, well, it's been 6 years. Yeah, 6 years. Wow. Let me know what you guys think about all these different cases being related. I don't see it. I see some of the similarities to some, but I think they're all, maybe some of them could be related. I always thought maybe Evansdale and Delphi, possibility, but I'm not sure if I think all of these. I think they're just like random murders that aren't connected to each other at all, because I think they're each personal to the victim, in my opinion. But yeah, let me know what you guys think. It's still interesting, and he still brings up some good points. All right, have a good day, everybody. Bye. Oh, don't forget to comment. I want to hear your guys' thoughts, so please leave me a comment under the video. Thank you. Bye.